Tennessee's soil scientist, and we spending your time and to do it, and hope you can educate us on what we need.
Okay. So I'm one of the three soil scientists that work for TDEC in the Middle Tennessee region. We cover all the way from the Tennessee River to the Eastern Time Zone, which is over near Crossville. So we cover from the Kentucky line to the Alabama line. So we've got all of that region that we cover. We cover everything from the basic systems on single-family homes that you guys may be familiar with to decentralized wastewater systems, the ones I think we're going to be talking about today. So let's jump right in. So not quite sure how much you guys know about this type of systems, but the whole foundation of a decentralized system starts with soils. Without suitable soils or soils that meet the guidelines, the project does not happen. So just want you to know, it's not like you can just go out here and start one of these projects. As you can see, the lines are plowed in there. They're plowed in the upper 8 inches of the soil profile, which is the most sensitive part of the soil profile that can be impacted. Okay. And we're going to dig into all of this a little bit later as we move through the presentation. So to start your understanding of soils in Tennessee, you need to know exactly where you are. Tennessee is a very unique state because we have east, middle, and west. And each one of those regions in Tennessee is totally different, okay? We are in what we call the Nashville Basin, and that can be further broken down, and we'll see. So the Nashville Basin, of course, you got the Highland Rim around the basin, and the Nashville Basin is broken up into two sections. It's the outer central basin and the inner central basin. And if you don't know where you are right now in Bedford County, you are in the inner central basin of the Nashville Basin. What makes that unique is our soils are very unique because of the limestone and the clay percentages that that area produces. Okay? As you can see, I don't know if you can see Bedford County very well, but it is in the pink looking area. And as you know, it's all pretty much in the inner basin of the Nashville Basin. And like I said earlier, these soils that we have, based on where we're located in the Central Basin, they're very clay, and they tend to have a lot of rock issues. All right. So how does a decentralized wastewater project usually start? It usually starts with a landowner or developer hiring a private soil consultant to complete a preliminary soils map. This map identifies the locations and the size of potential suitable soils area. You notice I underline potential. At this point, we don't really know if those soils are going to meet the state requirements, but he is doing what we call a preliminary soil map, okay? This map also helps to locate areas worthy of grid staking for the final map. The preliminary map is often saves the developer and landowner time and money during the beginning process of the decentralized wastewater project, okay? And you'll see why this is so important for him to do this preliminary map. Now, he doesn't have to, but as a developer or a property owner, you want to know whether you have the potential for that project to move further down the process. If you're running into a lot of soils on the preliminary that don't meet the requirements, there's probably no reason for you to move further down the process with that project, okay? This is a typical area that if you didn't do a preliminary map, that area might be grid staked, and the surveyor is not grid staking these areas for free. But you can instantly look at that area and tell it's not worthy of grid staking. So you save this guy time and money by doing this preliminary map. Like I said, he doesn't have to, but it's really, really worth his time to do the preliminary. In some cases, these areas are just too shallow, and Bedford and Marshall and Wilson and Rutherford has a lot of this country, as you guys probably already know. They're very shallow and they're very rocky. Okay, so now he has delineated or found an area worth grid staking. And I'm pretty sure y'all all have driven down the road and you've seen these rows and rows of grid stakes across a property or middle of the field. Those are areas that are waiting for a private soil consultant to determine whether those areas are suitable. Now, a lot of these sites that you might see may be single-family home sites that are done on a grid system. So he will bore on those stakes in the centers and then delineate the suitable soils from unsuitable soils using that grid stake method. All right? And you can see these are probably on 100-foot grids between, basically what I'm saying is there's 100 foot of the distance between the stakes. So we grid staked, the private soil consultant has done all the preliminary work, and now he's moved on to the final map, which is the map that the engineers and the state all has to have before this project can be designed and permitted. We do not work off a preliminary map. That is only a map that is used between the landowner and the private soil consultant to give him an idea whether that project is worth moving further down the process. Okay, so we have to have a final soil map that has all the information well detailed on that map. And this is what it would probably look like. All right, so to give you an idea, all that work is done within the guidelines of chapter 16 and 17 of the guidelines. Now, these guidelines are separated based on 16 is dealing with spray. Some utilities or some municipalities, they have spray systems. Chapter 17 basically outlines the guidelines for drip irrigation. All right? So that's the basic difference between the two chapters. I want you to also understand that the land-based unit that I work for of TDEC does not control that document. That document is controlled by Water Pollution Control, which is another section of TDEC. All right? It is not under the section that I work for. Go ahead. I know of one, and it's in Rutherford County. Okay. The problem you get into when you get into spray is the setbacks get so huge that it takes up so much space, whereas you're able to utilize more of your land if you go subsurface with it because of the spray head spraying such a wide area, and then the setbacks off property lines and things like that tend to eat up a lot of space. So most people don't, or municipalities do not use spray anymore. So yes, that was a thing for a while, but it's kind of gotten away from. Yeah, exactly. You're having those spray heads freeze. I mean, we had weather that didn't even break freezing, right? So you can imagine the issues you're going to run into when you got freezing spray heads. So it's kind of gotten away from. Yeah. It's so much maintenance and so many other things go into it. It's just not very feasible to use spray systems. But now, as far as the soil conditions, the same thing that you would do for drip irrigation, the private soil consultant is going to evaluate the soils in the same manner. So it really, once that map is made, it's up to the utility to decide what direction they want to go, spray or drip. But he's done all the work so that the project could go either way, okay? But remember, here's the key that I want you guys to take away from here, is that program is controlled under water pollution control guidelines. These documents are water pollution control documents, okay? These chapters, all right? So what are the properties of soil that make something suitable from unsuitable, all right? So the guidelines are built around the soil texture and the structure and combination, the depth of redox features or wetness features if they're present in the soil profile, okay? And the soil depth to a restrictive horizon, which in this case, what we're referring to is rock, fragile or fragic properties, okay, if they're present in the soil profile, all right? So those are the features when we start evaluating soils in the field that we're looking for to distinguish whether one is suitable from one that's unsuitable. Did I go too far? Yes, I jumped one. Okay. So I don't want to really use the term suitable and unsuitable. I'd rather use desirable and undesirable. Okay. And I'll kind of show you why a little bit later on. So if we're looking for soils that really have good properties, we want textures to be loamy and silty. We want the structure to be moderate or strong. We want the drainage classes to be well. And we want depths to be deep and very deep soils. These are the kind of soils that we actually want. They're perfect situations, so to speak. The undesirable soil properties are textures that are clay or fine textured. Bedford County, Marshall County, Wilson, Rutherford. Structures that are weak or massive, okay? Drainage classes that are poor or somewhat poor, and depths that are shallow. Those are not the properties that make great decentralized wastewater systems. All right. So what are the minimum WPC minimum rules in these documents? So the textures or the soil properties that meet the standards, like I said earlier, we want really well-drained soils. Now here is where the water gets a little bit muddied up. Moderately well-drained soils are in the document, but they are not desirable. And we will see later on why. Now, I want to make you guys aware that the project may come to you that has moderately well-drained soils on it, but it's not a good thing to use those soils, okay, without building in some extra measures, so to speak, all right? If the textures are clay or silty clay, you need a moderate or strong structure with those, all right? Moderately deep or deeper soils, right? And I'm going kind of to two extremes here, all right? No, not in this case. I'm building the minimum requirements versus the completely ones that we are not going to use in this case. So the properties that don't meet, somewhat poorly drained soils, wetness features, or those gray colors that we often see in soils, if they're less than 20 inches, those soils are out. They are not used or deemed suitable or worthy of one of these systems. If you have weak or massive structure inside 20 inches or less than 20, we don't deem those suitable. Shallow depths less than 20 inches to rock, fragipan, or fragic properties, those are not deemed suitable, okay? So you kind of see these are the things when we're born as soil consultants or soil scientists out there, we're having to eliminate these soils based on these soil properties and then delineate them based on the soil map, draw lines between them, and then determine, once all this is done, determine how much of that property is suitable from unsuitable. Sometimes the developer gets his direction a little bit mixed up. He goes in thinking, I've got 200 houses. Well, you don't really have 200 houses because you may not have the soils to support 200 houses. So, like I said earlier, it's all based on those soils out there. You don't have it, you're not going to get it. Examples of soil structure. So the ideal soil structures that we really want, extend, remember, I got a combination of texture and structure working together. So we want granular structure and we want blocky structure. And blocky structure can be broken up into subangular blocky and angular blocky. Now, I'll show you a little bit later on. We really do not use platier or wedge or columnar. Some situations we will use prismatic. Once again, we prefer not to, but I just want to make you aware that prismatic structure generally goes along with a moderately well-drained soil, which is that soil I told you. Really, extra measures going to have to be built into the process to make those soils really function properly. All right, so here's a diagram that kind of outlines how this, once we know these soils, how the system is installed, the depths that are required, and that sort of thing. So it is desirable to have a minimum depth of 20 inches. Like I said, that's the bare bones of undisturbed. Key word, undisturbed. You cannot disturb these soils. You cannot run over them, compact them. Remember, I'm putting that system in the most vulnerable part of that soil profile, 8 inches. And if that is destroyed or filled or cut or any of that nature, it's deemed unsuitable. All right? Okay, so it has to be undisturbed and above, and I mean above a be restrictive horizon. All right? Everybody can, and then we got some more things here. So here's what's pretty unique. Even if the soil meets the depth requirements, it may not be suitable due to the texture and structure. All right, I'll show you an example of that a little bit later on. I think the next slide covers that. So let's take a look. We have the natural soil surface. Height is plowed in 8 inches. And then we have 12 inches of soil below that. That's our buffer. We have to treat this wastewater. So we are requiring a 12-inch buffer below that line to treat that wastewater. If we have less than 20 inches of soil profile there, we do not have sufficient soil there to treat our wastewater. That's the very reason why we're requiring a minimum of 20 inches. All right, bare bones minimum. We really prefer more. Okay, but this is what potentially is going to happen. I see it every day in counties like Rutherford, Wilson, Bedford, where you're going to get a lot of soils that are barely going to meet the requirements. The 20-inch buffer. The 12-inch buffer. Can be used, but just remember, we really prefer more depth there. Okay? Now, let's say we got another situation where we have a soil that shows signs of wetness. And the statement in red, if soil shows signs of wetness within a depth of 20 inches of the soil surface, it will be most likely that it will require a soil improvement practice, such as an interceptor drain or a drawdown drain. The problem we run into is, I'm going to show you later on, those are those moderately well-drained soils that takes a lot of extra work, measures built in to what you may or may not require to make those soils function properly. In this case, this statement is saying you can install an interceptor drain or a drawdown drain. Here's the problem. I've been around this for a long time. Engineers have not proven that they can make these systems work installing those practices. Let's say you got an area that's 3 acres in size of suitable soils, or 5 acres in size of suitable soils. How are you going to break that up in a way that you can put a drain around it and drain and make the center of that area that big, draw that water table down and make that area function properly? That is the reason why in most of these cases, those soils have issues. They have just never been proven to work very well. Installing. So what happens is they're mixed in with other soils with no drain, no soil improvement practice, so to speak. Okay. And by doing that, a lot of counties, CUD, Rutherford, requires a lot of extra measures built into those sites that they use. They will reduce the loading rate, maybe other things they do. But those soils are in our document. They can be used, but just be aware they potentially might have a problem. Okay? All right, so here's a perfect example of what I was saying earlier. We have a soil here that meets the 20 inches, right? Depth requirements. However, it's 26 inches of rock. However, it's only 12 inches of massive clay. Doesn't meet the requirements. Massive clay, and all of that has to happen after 20 inches. So, typical soil here in Middle Tennessee. Thousands and thousands of acres of that soil there. Soil called Talbot, shallow rock, 26 inches. Doesn't meet the requirements because you have to have that soil, that great structure with that clay texture. If you don't, wastewater will not move through that profile. All right. So we have made the map. We've done all of that. It's time to dig the pits and evaluate the site for the soil properties. This is where we really determine whether or not the site is going to meet the requirements or not. Okay. Dependent on the complexity of those soil patterns, as you can see here, this was one that was in Murray County. We had a lot of pits because those soil patterns were so intermingled in a way. One hole good, one hole bad, one hole good, one hole bad. It took a tremendous amount of soil pits to distinguish whether or not and delineate the suitable soils from the unsuitable soil. You can just see in that small area there the number of pits that were dug. These are some of the tools that we use to do that work. A good fixed blade knife, good tape measure, some nails to break out your soil horizon, the soil color book to determine whether or not the soil is wet, well drained, that sort of thing. Just a few tools here. All right, once those pits are dug, we then get in them, and then we determine all those soil properties, to what depth those soils change, and whether or not those soil properties are going to meet the standards or not. And that's the kind of thing we do. And in some cases, there may be hundreds of pits scattered across a property. Once you end, he will then take those nails to delineate those horizons based on color, texture, structure, depth, slope, wetness. All of these are soil properties that have to be delineated out and recorded. Type of form that information will be recorded on. This information is recorded here and then later transferred to the design engineer. He then takes that information on those forms and assigns a hydraulic loading rate. Okay? Okay?
When you had the pits there, now who is at that location?
Okay, now that's a great question. So up until the fall of 2023, the state, myself, and some of the other guys, we were doing the QA/QC on those sites with these people. You can see me here. This was done by us as a QA/QC measure up until the fall of 23. At that point, we got pulled out. We're no longer doing that QA/QC. That may be something that you guys may pass on to, zoning and planning that needs to be really thought about. The information that you're getting from the privates, if nobody's checking them, it's what you're going to get. Okay? So in the case of Rutherford County, CUD, when we got pulled out, since they run so many of them in that county, they went and hired their own soil consultant to make sure that their quality of work was what they needed. So to answer your question, nobody's doing it.
So they would just be their soil
The private
expert
soil consultant,
and maybe their engineer, somebody like just
Yes,
their
sir.
whole group.
yes,
That's where we as a county will have to have our own soil scientist or soil consultant that we can depend on.
it's crucial to get that information correct. It really is. Like I said earlier, my first slide, the foundation of this depends on the soil conditions. Okay? Not saying that, privates are going to, send you false information. I really think they're trying to do a great job and want to do a great job. But enough said. Okay.
You have liability forever based on what they do, those engineers do. So you have to take that consideration. Therefore, you want to do what's right, or you could have tremendous liability and litigation coming down the pike, 20 years, 15 years.
You talking about the developer?
The developers, yeah, and the people who actually do the testing and do the engineering.
Okay. So that's what we would, like I said, we got pulled out and we no longer do that now. It ended.
You know,
in
if
fall
I
of
had
2020.
liability, I would want the state looking at it and concurring with me, so that would, if I had to defend a lawsuit, I could say, hey, the state.
Completely understand.
I fought
Completely.
for that. Also, I fought when they took the license away to keep these soil scientists licensed, and I fought for them on that also.
Okay.
About a year and a half ago.
Completely understand. So he's in there, he's delineating, separating. All that information then would be recorded on the sheet. Here's a completed sheet. Now, of course, I took the time to type one up, make it look really nice for you guys. But most of these are going to be handwritten in the field. They're going to be muddy and nasty. But that's that information that will then be transferred to the design engineer, and he will then assign loading rates. Most cases, as you can see, I've got different depths, different horizons, that sort of thing cut out there. The most limiting horizon inside the 20 inches is generally the one that dominates the hydraulic loading rate. Okay? You're not going to pick the best one. You shouldn't. Best horizon to base your hydraulic loading rate up. You should use the worst horizon, the one that has in this case, it's going to sound strange, but the lowest loading rate. Okay? It works a little bit different. You want one that like 0.075 is worse than 0.3. Okay, in this case. All right. So let's look at some soils a little bit and get you a little bit familiar with what is going to maybe show up. We're taking this information that you're seeing and then transferring it to the old sheets. So I got A horizon, B horizon, C horizon. All right. In every single one of those horizons, the soil properties are changing. Every single one of them. I got a dark surface, I got a reddish looking subsoil, and then I got a rocky subsoil. And each one of those, what I'm basically trying to get you to understand is, of those three horizons, the worst one inside the 20 inches is the one that dominates the hydraulic loading rate, or should. All right? All right, another soils here. Really good one, really bad one. All right, well, no, I shouldn't say really bad. Here's the funny thing. They both meet the requirements for subsurface drip. I got one that's clay, well-drained, moderately deep. I got one that's silty, well-drained, and very deep. This is the kind of two soils that will occur in the same field. But which one is the engineer going to design with? Is he going to take the best one and design the whole project based on the one on the right? Or is he going to take the one on the left and design with? That's the kind of things that need to be thought about when you're, looking at these kind of projects. But they both meet the requirements, right?
Which one would you recommend?
From the standpoint of using for the design, you got to use the one on the left. You have to. Yeah. It's if you can make the one on the left function properly, it's no doubt the one on the right is going to function properly. Okay.
Would you adjust the hydraulic loading rate?
Correct.
Each one of them?
That's exactly what you do in this case. You would adjust it to fit the one on the left, the clay soil that's moderately deep. That's correct. Yep. So here's drip line installed. Very marginal soil occurs every day in Middle Tennessee in the basin. 20 inches of rock, clay texture. Meets the requirements. So therefore it was used, right? Hopefully the engineer designed those hydraulic loading rates to fit that situation, right? And it was all recorded properly and documented and all that stuff, all right? Okay, so now let's get into a little bit of the gray area, the wetter soils. As you can see, the lower part of the profile there, you start seeing some grays. Great surface and everything down to where the wetness starts, right? Look good on paper, but at some point you're going to start seeing the gray colors, which means this soil's got some issues. It's a bucket that's it's like looking at a 5-gallon bucket. It's already half full of water. And you're going to add more water to that bucket. Okay? You can overfill it. These are the soils that occur in that same landscape with those other soils. So at some point, the design people have to figure out how to design these systems based on all of these soil conditions, or delineate them all in a way that each one of these can be broken out into their own zones and treated differently. Okay, so this is a soil that's got a hard pan in it. It perches water, as you can see, the gray colors in the lower part, but it does meet the requirements. Once again, that was the ones I was telling you. Special measures need to be thought about when you're dealing with these moderately well-drained soils. Once again, another moderately deep soil. But as you can see, this soil progressively gets clayer and clayer as we move down. And you can see the really nasty yellow-looking color in the bottom. And at that point, that soil is no longer suitable for a system because it turns into massive clay. And that is the cutoff. If that yellowish-looking clay is up in the upper part of the profile, it's not deemed suitable. Okay? This is pretty common in Middle Tennessee for those soils. Another wet one. Okay? You can clearly see the gray colors in this. These are the soils that we tend to have problems with if they're not managed properly. They just like I said earlier, these soils right now, you can walk across these fields that have these soils in, they're spongy. They're soft. All right. Once again, 2 soils meet the requirements, but look at the difference in them. The soil on the left has a cobbly subsoil, and you guys know what's going to happen when you put wastewater to it. It's going to shoot through that soil very quickly. So it's not clay, it's not a bad thing. It's just when you get too much clay. We want enough retention time in that soil to treat that wastewater. So the soil on the left may be a little bit too fast because it doesn't have enough soil there to really properly treat the wastewater. Once again, something that needs to be thought about when you're designing these wastewater systems. Soil on the right, clay soil, but an excellent structure. Excellent, ideal. So that all clay soils are bad. If they're well-structured clays, they will work well for a wastewater system. And the one on the right is. It was just a gorgeous wet, even though it's clay, but it was so well-structured that it would really work well for wastewater.
Question just came up. Is there a lifespan for soil that it can treat water? Say you got good soil to work with. I mean,
we don't know. We really don't know.
100 years from now, is that soil going to be just as effective as it is starting out?
I really don't think so. It's just my opinion. I've seen really good soils treated badly, and they go bad real quick. Too much water. You can take a well-drained soil. I can take that soil on the right and overload it to the point it'll turn hydric. It will turn gray at the surface. It will. You cannot abuse them. That's, once again, design people have to work those things out. But we don't know. To be honest with you, I don't think anybody knows the lifespan of a soil. Really don't. Okay, I think we've been here. Yes, right? I think we've looked at this one. Okay. Really poor soils here. I think now you guys have kind of an idea of what makes a good soil and what makes a bad soil. These soils were only a few inches to shell. Okay, they were doing things with these. Not even going to go in, but I just wanted to more or less you guys to see a really good picture of a soil here that does not even come close to meeting the requirements. These are generally this is all eliminated during the preliminary process. That map you just get these knocked out, delineate out, and move on. All right, beautiful soil, Middle Tennessee. Great structure, clay, very shallow, 16 inches of rock. So All the other properties, soil properties, work well. Great structure. It's clay, but the limiting factor here is depth of rock. You don't have that full 12-inch buffer if you plow in 8 inches. You don't have enough soil here to treat wastewater. Well, of course, I think we can all see what's wrong with this one. This is what happens when you were asking me earlier. I can take a really good soil and overload it, and it'll turn to one of these in a few years. So we have a soil here that has a clay texture. Water won't move through it. And then it has a high water table too. These soils, they actually had a system decentralized nearby near these soils. That's the reason why I took these pictures. So as you can see what happens. They fill up with water during the winter months. So just think if you had line 8 inches deep in a soil like this. Well, it's going to pond and you're going to have issues with it. These are the soils, once again, they should be easily identified and eliminated during the preliminary process. Marginal soils again. I keep coming back to that because these are the soils that meet those requirements but are problematic. They have fragile pans and high water tables, and they all load up really bad during the winter and early springs months, and they need to be handled very carefully if you're going to use them. There's another one, another shot of one. Of course, typical Bedford County here. Very dark soils, shallow to rock, and very clay. Very poor soil conditions. The one on the left, it was pretty interesting. I had a guy that his granddaddy had farmed this for a garden at some time. And of course, I know you guys have all heard, that rich dark soil, and I used to grow crops. Well, you may grow crops, but it don't grow houses. So, no, it was kind of funny. This is a pretty unique issue. It may be one that someone may come across here in the county. So this particular property was in Rutherford County, and the soil properties itself was excellent. Some of it was a little bit, but it was well structured. The problem with this site was it was absolutely inundated with frag rock. I mean, you could not dig a square pit. As you can see, we tried to dig multiple pits, but it was so much broken and fractured rock in that site. And so they just decided the line couldn't be installed. It wasn't that the soils are so bad. It was just you physically can't plow line in those areas. It will tear up every bit of the drip zone trying to install it. So pretty unique site in the sense that it wasn't the soil conditions that were prohibiting us to permit it. It was the fact that it couldn't be installed. So, no.
That could be used for a single home site, probably.
Potentially. I mean, this was a big piece of property, and it was very unique that every bit of it was like this. So, in your case, a single-family home, we could probably find a spot out there on a large tract somewhere that wasn't this bad. Okay?
I've seen that.
Yeah. It was an experience I had never come across before. Usually we can find a spot where the rock is not just everywhere, but in this case, it was all over the property, every bit of it. About as good as it gets. I mean, a beautiful soil. Actually, this soil had a buried horizon in it. You see that dark zone? That's a buried horizon. So basically what happened, this was at a foot slope of a landscape. We had soil that had been plowed and washed for hundreds of years on a higher landscape, had washed down on the foot slope, buried the soil underneath it, and so you can clearly see the interface between the two soils there. The lighter soil on top, the dark soil, and then it starts transitioning into the natural soil underneath the old surface. Okay? We find in Tennessee this unique situation. All right, so we've got all our soils and everything. We've delineated them. The map's finished. The engineers are all done their work, and we're ready to plow in and build a zone. So they will then take the tractor with a plow on it. They will put the drip line on the spools. They will sit it on the tractor and they will plow in 8 inches deep. The telemetry here, guys, is pretty amazing. That tractor is driven hands-free by a machine. Telemetry. Those are exactly 2-foot centers between those lines. And he just sits up there. The tractor drives itself to the end of the field, turns itself around, comes back, and plows another line in. And that is basically what happens when they plow in drip. Okay? After a finish line, that's what it looks like. It's all tied to the supply line on those ends, at the ends of the fields. All right, so let's talk a little bit about maintenance. This is a problem that we have identified across the state here recently. Is a lot of these things are plowed in, but no one goes back and takes care of the maintenance on them. So this was a very poor site location for a drip field. As you can see, I've got a head cut starting, and it's already beginning to wash out my soil over top of my drip zone, and it has exposed my line. It's not so much in some cases that the soils are bad. You can pick a really poor spot to put the drip field. I mean, some of the best soils we have are in bad areas. They're in Tennessee floodplains, right? They flood, but the water gets out of there quick. Okay?
Why are
And
we
this
see-
is
why are we
exact-
seeing so much of that?
Pardon?
Why do you see so much of that as lack of maintenance?
Who knows?
You can lay a blame. Go ahead.
Who knows? It's almost as if we forgot that the thing was out there. So,
Is
So-
that from being run up and down the elevation?
this was actually put across a drainage way. Okay, you got water that passes through that drainage way. Well, it's going to scour at some point. So that's what happened here. It wasn't that soils were bad. It was just a poor site to put a drip
Poor
zone.
design.
Yes. Yeah. And this is eventually what happened. It got so bad that the head cut, that water passing through that drainage way, started to eat back up into the drip zone. It was okay to design that system coming down the side slope, but when you got in that swag in that drainage way, you should have never ever installed that line across, even though the soils were suitable and they met the requirements. It was just a poor site to put drip zones in.
Now, I see the date on that 2013. Do we have that problem still today as much as we did back in 2013?
I'd like to think not. I'd like to think.
Couldn't an engineer tight lined across that area and then start it again?
I don't know if he ever saw the site. I'm not. Yeah. The problem is something has to be done now. It has to be fixed somehow or another. We're going to have to go in there and probably cut those lines off in that area because this head cuts is going to get worse. It's going to eventually work its way back up into the whole drip zone if we don't. So
That's where correct bonding of the project comes in.
correct. Some measure has to be, and that's what I wanted to make you guys of all the type of situations that might come your way. Okay. All right. Another poor site. Very poor site. Soils were great, right? And they based everything on the soil conditions, not the site conditions. This area is a closed depression on an upland that ponds after periods of heavy rain. But the soils are wonderful. But you're trying to put 10 gallons of water in a 5-gallon bucket. It just won't handle it. So when you're introducing water to a site that ponds, you're going to have problems. Very important. Once all this work is done, the private soil consultant has done his job, the engineers have done their job. Who is going to keep up with a location after several years have passed where that area has been delineated that's suitable? Who's going to mark it, keep up with the staking, and be able to identify the area when it's time for the contractor to come and install the lines? Whose responsibility is that? Don't know. But in this case, they missed the zone. They mistakenly put the drip zone in an area where the soils were not mapped and were deemed unsuitable. Shallow, nasty clay. That happens because somebody didn't keep up with those zones and located them properly. And the installer, contractor went and started putting in lines, and he realized, oh God, I put half my zone in an area that's unsuitable. One of the maintenance issues that could occur, somebody has to know exactly where those soils were deemed eligible for those drip zones. Oop, going the wrong way. Guys, if these things are mapped correctly, they're designed correctly, they're managed and maintained properly, you should get many, many years out of a good. They're bush hogging it, they're maintaining it, it got maintenance, and everything's done properly here. Okay? That's the idea of what we really want to see out there. Concludes my presentation. Hope it's helpful. Got any questions? Let me know. So,
I want to say, Terry, I've known you for a long time, and you've been on many of our projects with Randy and Phil Dickerson and all. And
yeah. Yeah.
You still live in Cornersville?
I do. Oh, no,
Yeah.
I actually live in Lewisburg. Yeah.
Lewisburg?
Yeah, sure do.
But
Yeah.
anyway, he really knows his stuff.
Yep.
I've been out on jobs, and he's really thorough with what he does.
Yep. I enjoy doing what I do. I really
he worked
do.
with Phil and Randy, and of course Phil passed
Sure have.
away here a while back, and
Yeah.
they're brothers.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It is. Soil. I used to have a soils professor. He's like, dirt is what you get on your fingernail. That's right. Yeah. So, thank you for inviting me, Mr. Gill. I've enjoyed it. If you know of anybody else that's going through this, let them know that I'll be glad to do the same presentation for them. But
Terry,
anytime y'all got any questions, I got some business cards there. Get you one. Give me a call. Doesn't necessarily have to be related to this type of project. It can be related to anything that's, for as wastewater and soil. So I'll be glad to answer those questions for you. So
Terry is very informative. Does anybody else have any questions that you may have for him? And of course, we have his card here. We can call you later
Yep.
on. But
okay, sure.
So,
Yeah, I know how it is. You get home and like, oh, I got a question. So call me.
it's just
Feel free
it's in a
to.
part of our process. I think you're
Okay.
instrumental.
Right.
I think it
Souls
was a good
are,
idea.
it's the beginning of this whole process. Without souls, like I said earlier, those developers, they get all worked up and they think, oh, I see 200 houses. No, you don't. Until those soil conditions, till you know those, you don't have 200 houses. So,
I've got just a general question. Since in the area that we're in, the central basin, roughly what percentage of the soil would you say in Bedford County would be suitable for drip line? Just roughly.
I'll go 60.
60% of our soil would be
Now,
suitable.
that's taking in consideration those marginal soils we talked about, okay? Okay? I would probably say about 60%. Yeah. Now you're going to have but you're going to have areas that a lot of that's going to be consolidated in.
It's going to be concentrated. in
Exactly.
certain
That's
other
the word
areas-
I was looking for.
Other areas, it's
You're just going to wipe out
nothing.
pretty
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
Yeah. You've driven around the counties. When you start seeing those areas where it's just nothing but limestone sheets, you can drive through those pretty quick. Okay, because it's not that there's spots in there that won't work, but from the development standpoint, you have to have a sizable spot because at the prices of land here in Middle Tennessee, if you're going to spend that kind of money, as a developer's thinking, I got to produce X amount of houses for that cost of that land. And if it's not going to work out, then it's just not worthy for him to spend that kind of money on the property and only get 40 or 50 houses. Okay. Rutherford County has run numbers. I think me and you were talking about that one day where they have calculated that it takes X amount of houses to even be able to afford one of these systems. If you're not building a minimum number of houses to make this work, it's not worth the time to even try for one of these systems. I don't know the exact number, but they do. So that's another thing you got to think about. Most developers, you know, they may build a subdivision that only, you know, 40 houses or something. It's not going to work for decentralized. The cost of these things can cost you, you know, several hundreds of $1,000s. So you got to be able to make those calculations work on the property and everything.
So that would make high density housing.
That's generally what happens.
Yeah.
Oh,
Either that or very upscale housing.
correct. It's yes. So you got to make, and you remember the water bill and the wastewater bill is tagged on to the you know the water bill. So that's passed on to the guy that's living in the home. So he's got that has to be affordable. You can't hand him a $500 water bill because you got a decentralized wastewater system. So all those things have to be, you know, thought about as you're developing one of these. So soils, all these calculations, engineering designs, all that sort of thing has to be thought about.
Minimal soils.
Mm-hmm.
The area just has to be larger.
Actually, no. To be honest with you, it would probably be best that the engineer calculated the hydraulic loading rate much lower is what needs to happen. And I think Consolidated has done that. They use those soils over there, but they reduced that hydraulic loading rate to probably the bare bone minimum. Okay. It's not that they don't work. You have to understand soil patterns. It's in some cases, those soil patterns are not where you can delineate or separate the marginal soils out from the really good ones. So when that contractor's plowing in, he's plowing across 4 or 5 different soils. Yeah. That's where, as a good engineer, he is calculating that loading rate on the worst one in that area, not the best one. So that's where that is crucial. Developers don't like that because they go, oh, I got these soils that have a really good hydraulic loading rate, but I cannot separate these soils based on these soil patterns in a way, so I have to use them all. You know, hey, you probably know, you saw the picture earlier where the guy was plowing. Let's see if I'm going back. Oops. Let's see if I can get back to it.
I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
And
There's no
I
telling
know
how many.
when I go across the field, I may have 5 different soil textures in one pass.
Exactly. And that's what I'm getting at. There's no telling how many different soil patterns or soil units, series that he's crossing right there. But as a good engineer, he's taking the worst one in that zone and designing around it, not the best one. Okay. That's how the engineering, and I don't get into the engineering. That's what they get paid to do.
Terry, define the hydraulic rate.
So basically, I'm gonna try to keep it kind of simple. So it's all based on how quick that water is moving through that profile, and it's
15%. What's that?
okay. So in that case, on the sheet here, right? Let's go back. I don't know. Does everybody have one? Okay.
They have it. I don't know if they have it here, but
The
they have one.
0.15 is based on the worst profile and worst soil in that zone, and it's a matter of I'm trying to think of a simple way of saying this.
That'd be important to make
How
it simple.
quick and fast it moves through. The rate, how quick and fast it moves through. You got to remember, you've got all these different horizons. And every time I go from a silt loam to a silty clay loam, that's changing. So he's going to design that hydraulic loading rate based on that 1.5 or 0.1 or 0.15 or whatever, based on that worst hydraulic rate, calculating on how fast it's moving through all those zones.
So
it may be an average or whatever across all the zones. I'm not sure I'm answering. I'm not sure I can get you to understand.
If you had a soil that had a loading rate of 0.75,
that's fast.
Okay, so
That's really, really
so
fast.
that's a better soil than
Yes.
would require a loading rate of 0.10.
Yes,
That's a better soil.
that's much better soil. Yeah,
Has to be a larger,
Right.
It can handle a larger volume. Than
exactly,
0.75.
exactly.
Okay.
But you got to remember also in our document, the most the engineer can ask for based on this document is 0.25. That's the maximum based on this document. All right? 0.25. The document says that. So what Rutherford County does is that's our baseline to start from. Then they start reducing based on those marginal soils and all these other things. Okay? Based on, I'm looking at their sheet here, and it looks like it's pretty common for to have a 0.15
It looks like it.
and point one. So they're reducing those soils based on soil conditions. So yeah, if you look at that chart that's in those documents, you'll see 0.3s, you'll see 0.4s, but then there's a footnote down there at the bottom that says the highest maximum loading rate that you can be asked for to design one of these systems is a 0.2.
So they've
Too fast.
actually eased up. If they went from 0.25 to 0.15, they've kind of backed off a little bit.
Correct. They're building in that those measures, what I'm talking, based on those hydraulic loading rates.
It would help maybe a developer
Yeah,
have it a lower. So,
sure.
I mean, they've kind of eased back
Yeah.
on that because
that's exactly right.
I was looking at their others and they were at 0.25, and now they've backed it off to
Yeah.
0.15.
Rutherford's really
So they've kind of
taken in
eased it up.
consideration,
They may have made other things harder, but they
Another
kinda
thing
made-
that I didn't touch on is something that you might want to think about. We have not even talked about duplication for these systems. Remember, when we do a single family home, you have to have primary area and duplication area, because at some point we know that system's going to fail. It's going to have a problem. It's going to have a hiccup. And so the
Currently
state
CUD is a 50%,
I think that's right.
and they're considering going to 100, I think. Is that right? On their new regs, their proposed regs.
So that's something that, as a steering committee, you guys, might want to think about letting your other committee know about. Okay, maybe something they want to build into their, process or rules and regs that if they're going to build something. That, hey, at some point you were asking how long we think they'll last. We don't know, but if you don't have any duplication area, and you got 250 houses tied to one of these, and it goes catastrophically bad, what are you going to do? Guess they would be. Yeah, that's one of the things we've identified in our last state study, that some of them are not doing so well, and we don't have space to more or less fix
But
them.
the state standards don't have duplication
No,
rates.
they do not. No. Just once again, that's the reason why I want you guys, if you're going to pass this information on, it's something that perhaps needs to be thought about.
I agree.
So, anything else?
Well, thank you, Terry. I appreciate it. I think
it. Thank you
informed
for
us very-
inviting me. Hopefully, like I said, there's my business cards. So give me a call if you got any questions, and hopefully, I kind of gave you an oversight on what all this means. So, like I said, soils are where it all starts. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. At this time, I think if you have no questions, I think we can go back to any new business that we have. I guess first thing on new business is to confirm a next meeting date, which I think would be, the way I looked at it, would be like March the 12th. Does that look right? Then we'll set the next meeting for March the 12th. The next thing I want to discuss is and we're kind of trying to draw this thing down. We're trying to get as much information as we can for the committee. I think so far we've been pretty well in trying to educate us a little bit, but in my opinion, I want y'all to come up with maybe an idea on our next speaker. I thought that we might want to get an installer, and so I went as far as to reach out to that was it our speaker last time, Mr. I forgot what his name. Yeah. And I said, would you send me a list of installers that y'all recommend and use? And he said, well, I tell you what, somebody that's on our list, which was in the meeting when I was there, was that Mr. Price, Eddie Price. you know, the one that was going to be on the board there, or, you know, was going to stand, thought he was supposed to be on the board. And he said, to me, he'd be, but, you know, but I hadn't said anything to him yet, but he, you know, I hadn't talked to him since, you know, right the first, but he was real eager to, you know, to want to try to help and inform. Then he also said that, you know, probably others wouldn't be too interested in coming, and he's local, so it might be better. But I don't know if y'all have, if y'all would like me to, I would ask him unless y'all have somebody else or have another idea of somebody else to, you know, to have as a speaker.
Do we know, has he done any installs in Rutherford County, do you know?
I assumed he has. He just said he's approved installer for CUD anyway.
Oh, okay, so he is an approved
Yeah, he's
installer
approved,
for CUD, okay.
Yeah, he's an approved installer. And he recommended him, I guess he knew. And there was another guy, we had somebody else here that meeting. I don't know whether he's an installer or what he was. If y'all would like me to, I would ask him to come to and speak. And what I'd like to do, you know, I asked, I'm trying to get the guy's name with CUD, but you know, he's one. I asked him to send me the document and then send the draft of I guess the what they're working on or their upcoming draft. And y'all have all those. Did everybody get one of those? So what I'd like, you know, it's a whole lot to digest. It's a lot to understand, and maybe an installer like Eddie can maybe have a better idea of how we can, you know, see what difference it is between the two, or help us about you know, deciding, you know what the best direction is to go. So I would, if y'all would like to, I would ask him, and then I don't know whether he has a draft. I'm sure he has the original, but let him kind of study that up, and maybe he can and educate us on that. If y'all think it's a good idea.
Terry, do you have anyone that you would possibly like for us to speak to, with the exception of Terry, or do you know him well enough that? Terry, Eddie. I'm sorry.
To be honest with you, I have no one that I could recommend. As far as I know, the best path there to figure out, you know, who possibly to you would be contact Rutherford County. They deal with them quite a bit. So,
Yeah, that's what we did.
yeah.
I mean, he's with Hawkins and Price. I don't know whether he's the Price or the Hawkins and Price. I don't know that, but you know, but you know, if he's got the same attitude he did.
I'd be fine with him. I mean, he had enough. Does do work.
Yeah, I think that's what we're, we did. I wasn't educated. Sammy's more educated in soils than anybody, and but all this other, it's kind of, it's a whole lot to soak up, and we want to try to, be ready to have something within a reasonable time for the plant. I think we're getting almost as far as we can get, where, maybe this next one where we've talked, got good soil information. We got, from the utility district, and then from installer. I don't know how far we can go from that. We're going to have to sit down and decide what to do. Probably let's say the March, and then maybe the next meeting. We have a session where we discuss what we need to do, and then start making recommendations by April or May.
And we've got some developments going on right now that I think we kind of need to push this and see if we can get this sucker along before these issues start to arise?
A little bit. I don't think we need to put all our eggs in one basket with Consolidated. There are a lot of others out there. I was the one that got them approved years ago when they couldn't get approved, when I served on the commission, on the state TDEC board. And legislation today at the Capitol, and I had a funeral I had to go to, so I was running late. Are you picking me up? I have served on committees for 40 years, tax committees, HUD committees in Washington, and all. And this committee, you really don't know how hard a job they really got, because of over the last 40 or 50 years, I fought for the little man, the minority who wanted to own a home, the middle class that wanted to own a home. And what we don't realize is going on is when we take and look at government, Wall Street bankers, and trial lawyers, we about destroy the ability to own a home in this country. And I've got all kinds of statistics over here. I study the Fibonacci rules of cycles. That's how I've been able to stay in business for so long in all the different companies that I got. So what we're tasked with here is to come up with something that protects God's earth and does it in the right way, what we've been given here. But everybody over the last several years has had a tendency to overdo. Well, let's just go a little inch further. It's unaffordable now. It's unaffordable for the middle class. It's unaffordable for the young people. And most of the wealth in this country is built from home ownership, the equity in their home. And that's where all of it comes down for when they get ready to retire. So we have to hit a margin in there. And as I say, I work with Consolidated. They brought me in to advise them on some things. I think they've gone overboard. I don't develop anymore. I'm too old. But I still think I owe it to the middle class and to the young people to try to stand up for them and what we are doing here. So we need to look at all options here. They pushed the envelope a little too far, in my opinion. And so what most people don't understand is you're not going to have the subdivisions coming down the line you've had in the past. Affordability is number one. But number two, most people don't realize we're going to lose 15% of the population in this country in the next 10 years. That's where the cycles and Fibonacci's come in the study of the cycles. The baby boomers like me will be dying off. Our kids are getting into the mortality table where they'll be getting into their late 50s and 60s. We're not going to have the need for housing that we've had in the past. So we got to be cognizant of that. I've got some paperwork here. Pass some of those down. Whoops. Some of those down. This affordability crisis is just unbelievable. When I built my first home, when you built your first home, you didn't have to go through all of this. We didn't have to put rain gardens in, which cost $7,000, and all the rules and regulations that trial lawyers have faced to push upon us. So we have to come up with what's fair and equitable and not overdo it. Just because somebody says we want something extra, we want to double the soils, somebody's got to pay for that. We're not able to get it done anymore. We can't build affordable housing. In 2008, we were the National Home Builder of the Year in the United States for workforce housing. We were Home Builder of the Year twice here in Tennessee. I don't do it anymore. My son does it some. We can't build it. We build retirement complexes now. If we had our way of doing things, we put on sewer every time. I don't like the systems. I don't like having to do this. But the demand's not going to be there in the future. I hate to say it because we're in that business. That's one of my businesses the family runs. So this is a really hard task that we've got before us here. Are there any questions?
I'm going to get a dozen phone calls, I guarantee it, with the comments you made about they've gone overboard. Can you put that in layman's terms and explain that a little bit more? Because I'm sure there's some people biting their nails right now.
Yeah. Well, what happens is when you're the only person and you got the franchise and you don't have to answer to anybody, you have a tendency sometimes just to push it the envelope too far. I get constant complaints, and I'm not involved in anything with developing anymore, but I know a lot of those people, and I get constant complaints how hard they are to work with. Time is money in this business. And if you stretch out something another 6 months or a year, it's extremely difficult and very expensive. We've got to put a cap somewhere. And what would,
About the reserves, I mean, they're at 50% now, and now they're talking about going to 100%.
well, I think with the state, we shouldn't push envelopes farther than what the state would push it. Are we going to come back and say, okay, you've got to have a reserve? It's the state regulation on regular septic tanks, and we put thousands of them in. And I don't know if I've ever had a failure. If somebody takes care of their septic tank correctly, feeds it like they're supposed to, they're not going to have a problem. But this guy does his job right over here. And Folly, I know you know Folly when he did his job. It makes it difficult. So why should we come up with a rule that's greater than what the state says? And everybody and every government has had a tendency to do that, push the envelope a little bit further. Do you know what the actual cost of a house is? And it was proven to me today when I did my study. Have any idea? The actual cost of a $400,000 house, 18% of the cost is labor and material. The rest of it's insurances, charging on tap fees, impact fees, review fees. So you're talking about a total cost of about $140,000 on a $400,000 house. Somewhere that's got to give.
Danny, I got a question. I called the state, and asked them about, the utility districts, who would be,
Yeah.
We would do, and to get a speaker, other than Consolidate. If it's got, I don't know they led me to believe that, our options are Consolidated and Shovel Power. Now, if that's not true,
Yeah. Well, there's one right there. Murfreesboro City does it also. That's their,
but I mean, for an option for us.
it's the franchisee who you appoint, who gets appointed by the county. They're going to call all the rules. They're going to call all the shots. But bonding that correctly and making sure we put through the rules and regulations, that somebody's responsible. I serve on the landfill board now, making rules and regulations for the new landfills at the Capitol. No. No. There's going to be more, though. And we're trying to come up with rules and regulations. And I've got my own idea on that, where the state's got to be involved, to take it out of the private garbage collectors' hands, to put it over more to the public hands where they can control it more.
Well, Danny, I'd like to talk
Mr.
to some more utilities that would be.
These people will do it.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification, because I just want to make sure I understand, what we're doing here, but not to discount our fellow colleagues' information. But my understanding is that we're not necessarily here to recommend an entity to control or to manage our wastewater. We're here to develop standards.
I understand that.
Which isn't necessarily to say that CEDU standards good or bad or otherwise. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that we're not here to decide that. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
But
Do we want to wind up like Wilson County, that are facing $1 million lawsuits because of the regulations that they had in the past that have failed now?
Well, I don't think, in the beginning when we first started this about 25 years ago, there really wasn't many regulations out there. Now we're beginning to see where the problems really lie. And the type of systems, the sand filters that they were using, are just bad designs. And that's why they've got problems. But the maintenance over a period of time is key. It's key. You have to bond the landfill for 50 years.
Systems. Every article that I have read on these systems, you know, it all has to do with maintenance. You know, what are you going to do with the system once it's approved and installed and in?
Now,
Maintenance is key.
yeah, a builder wouldn't usually say this, but we're dealing in what's called value engineering with these corporate builders now. And we're building throwaway homes. Most builders won't admit that. These homes that are being produced by these big corporations are 20-year homes. There's so many rules and regulations that come down on them. They keep cutting this out, they keep cutting this out, they keep cutting this out to try to keep their margins where they've got to be. And they're just terrible homes. I think my son's thinking about going to steel framing because the lumber is so bad. So anyway, affordability is real important. And when we come up with rules and regulations, we have to hit a center on that, a balance. And I think we need to look at other people and what they're doing and keep it to where the affordability is still there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I think maybe these questions to go to an installer. I think they would probably be, probably help us out more than anything, because I mean we don't know exactly what's required. So maybe we can get some answered next month from him. Y'all maybe prepare you some questions for him, and then what he recommends. That may help out. But is there anything else that we have come up? Any
Make a motion to adjourn.
okay. All right. All in favor?
Uh,